This is the Everything Weight Loss Podcast with Shari Ware, where we talk about everything, all things, anything to do with weight loss, health, and wellness. Today, we're talking to Karen O'Connor, who is the host of the Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. She's a blogger, she's an author, and a property development. Wow, that's a whole host of different things. Karen believes that everyone has an extraordinary story to share and that we all have the potential to inspire and contribute positively to other people. I absolutely love that. The Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood podcast was created out of a desire to both share those amazing and often hilarious stories, as well as wanting to connect with and support other women who are going through the interesting transition of midlife. So, first of all, Karen, welcome. Thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me on. It's so cool. Thank you.
Awesome. And I would absolutely love to know more about your story. Why do you do what you do? How have you gotten to where you are today and doing what you're doing?
So there's a couple of different points. That the reason that I do the podcast and the blog, and I've got the group and everything else, is really because about 8 years ago, we found ourselves in an interesting situation in that we had a big business and it was not doing very well, and we were looking down the barrel of bankruptcy, and I'd had a major operation and I couldn't exercise for 12 months, which for me, I'm used to exercising every day. I've exercised every day my whole life. That had a massive impact on me psychologically, and nobody told me that that was going to happen. And then I started with the whole perimenopause, not sleeping, hot sweats, rashes everywhere. And again, I was just told when I went to the doctor, I was just told, well, this is what happens at this time in life. Here's some antidepressants. You'll be fine in a few years. And I've spoken to so many other women since, like recently in particular, whose experience has been the same thing. And so you just find yourself, I found myself just completely lost. I didn't know who to turn to because the medical profession were completely dismissive of everything that was going on for me. They just said, oh, find something else to do if you can't exercise. Just occupy yourself elsewhere. You'll be fine in a few years. That was literally what I was told. Yeah. And in the middle of this, I had like one son who'd just gone through year 12, another son who was going through year 12 and wasn't doing that well. We had the business that really wasn't doing very well. And then we moved from Perth to Sydney at the same time. And my husband had stayed in Perth to try and keep the business going. And we'd moved back to, when we first moved over from the UK, we'd moved to Sydney. And I hated it, I've got to say. Really nice place to visit, hate living there. So we moved over to Perth, loved Perth, it was great. But John's got a lot of family there. So I thought, oh, let's be around the family. It'd be good for the kids and everything. But I still hated Sydney. So we moved up to country New South Wales because one of our daughters had been at school there for a few years. That was great. But I found myself surrounded by all these women. This is my view, right? This is not the truth. This is my view. I found myself surrounded by all these women who had their act together. They were a similar age to me, but they seemed to know what they were doing and their life seemed to be going swimmingly, whereas I was just like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing now. I've got 2 kids who have left home, another 2 who are like going towards leaving home. I'm looking down the barrel of empty nest. What am I supposed to do with my life? And I didn't know. Like, I'm a quantity surveyor by profession. So I used to run building sites, and that's one of the reasons why we've done property developing, is because we've been in the construction industry, my husband and I, since we left university. But if I want to be a QS again, I'd have had to go back to university and do my degree again. And I'm not that enamored with being a quantity surveyor to want to go and spend another 4 years back at uni and do the whole thing again, just no. So I was just really lost, and still going to the doctor and going seeing a psychologist. The psychologist really helped, but it really did occur to me like I was the only person who'd ever felt like this in the entire history of the world, because nobody else seemed to have a story like mine. And then I gradually realized that maybe that was because I wasn't talking about it. Maybe it could be that I was putting on this big front and I was, acting like I was okay, whereas in reality I was really seriously not okay. But so was everybody else. But it was also very difficult to find out what happens to women during menopause, because, there's all these books out there and they are great, but, they'll list out, well, you might get this and you might get that and you might get the other. And it was only talking to older women, and I was talking to one older woman in particular, and I said, I haven't slept in 4 years. She said, oh, you got another 6 to go, my love. She said, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. She said, I slept maybe 3-4 hours a night for a decade. I'm like, whoa, really? And then I found out, like, I've heard of stories since then. One lady, she started menopause 30 years ago. She still gets hot flashes.
Wow.
So there's no time frame. And it's not a topic that's discussed until we actually go through menopause. And what really hit home for me was, I don't want my daughters to go through this saying like, oh my God, what's happening to me? At least if you're prepared for something and you've got an idea of like, here's 200 possible things that can happen to you through menopause. You might get 30 of them, right? But, massive long list. I just want to get that information out there. And for other women who are going through perimenopause or menopause, to understand that this is what happens. It is a real pivotal point in our life where everything changes and there's nothing wrong. I think that's the big thing. That is what is supposed to happen. Somebody was telling me a few weeks ago that in the American Indian Society, it's actually treated as significant as going through puberty, as a boy reaching puberty. It is that level of significance, whereas we tend to treat it as something's over, that's the end of our lives. Yeah. And, we just bide in time until we die. Like, well, actually, no. What if it's not that case? And so I had to look at it in a different way. And really, that's the whole thing, is to provide support and a connection for other women going through this, because it's not something that's spoken about. Also, somebody messaged me the other day and said, because I spoke in the group, I don't know whether you saw a post that I put up in the Menopause, Marriage and Motherhood group on Facebook. And I asked about, I can't remember what the question was. And one member replied that her husband thinks she's making it all up.
Oh, wow.
And she's just using it as an excuse to get her own way and do what she wants to do.
Oh, wow.
We need to educate and understand. And that's the reason why I'm doing it. And the other reason is about sharing people's stories, because we've all got these amazing things that we've been through, and because they happen to us, we don't think they're important. We just go, no, well, I dealt with it, that was it, and I've moved on and I've learned a few things. But to other people, it can actually be the difference in making the connection for them to take a step forward and move their lives forward, So it's those two reasons and why I do what I do. And I like talking to people.
Wow. It certainly seems like you're good at that. So sounds like you're the perfect person to bring this conversation about. I just want to say that I'm so glad that I found you at this point in my life, because I don't feel that I've started going through menopause yet. And I'm pretty sure from what you've said that I would know if I was. But I now feel like I'm going to have a supportive place to ask all of the millions of questions that I know I will have when it comes to that time. So thank you for appearing in my life right at the perfect moment.
You're welcome.
So, and I feel that there's part of why I wanted to do this episode with you as well is because I know that there's a lot of other people a lot of other women out there who are just like you and who are just like me, that probably don't realise that there are places like you are providing in your Facebook group where people can go and get support. So,
Yeah.
Karen is here to help.
Yes, I'm here. Come talk to me. I'm friendly.
She's very friendly, and I love her hair too, my favourite colour.
Thank you. Yes.
So, and of course, I'll put all the links in the notes when we finish this podcast. But for now, I feel like you've had most people that I speak to, in fact, everybody that I speak to who I've done an episode with, they've all had what I call a superpower come out of their story. So what would your superpower be that's come out of everything that you've just told us?
Do you know, it's really interesting. It'll be about 4 or 5 years ago now, I went to it was actually a Dancing with the Stars fundraiser thing down in Armidale, New South Wales. A friend of mine was dancing and she sat me next to her mum. And I found out afterwards, I said, oh, you know, your mum had a great time. You know, she was a bit shy at first and blah, blah, blah. And she said, Karen, that was why I sat her next to you, because you make people relax and feel really safe and comfortable, and then they start enjoying themselves. She said, if I'd sat my mum next to anybody else, she wouldn't have spoken for the entire night. Whereas I had a mum up dancing and doing stuff. And then I thought, and I was talking to the kids about it, and they said, Mum, people come up to you in the street and start telling you their story. It's really embarrassing. So we'll be standing there at the bus stop and some random stranger will just walk up to you and start talking. And then when I've been talking to all my friends or talking to people that I've just met, acquaintances, they do want to open up. So I've just got something that I think is my superpower in making people just go, blah, this is me.
Wow.
Which is so cool.
That is a beautiful superpower, and the world needs people like you. So that is awesome. All right. So I'm going to ask you then, in relation to the whole subject about women and menopause and all of those things, what would you say would be the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to their health and wellness in regards to it all?
I think for me, like in the work that you do, your health actually starts with your mindset and what you're thinking and that little voice that's going on in your head. And so I think the worst thing, or the biggest mistake people make, is not reaching out to people and thinking that they're the only ones and there's something wrong with them. Yeah, no, probably, you know, more than 50% of the population is experiencing this at some point in their lives. It's not talking to people and isolating themselves. And the best thing to do is just reach out and go, you know what, I feel really rubbish and I'm really struggling and I don't know what to do and I don't know what to expect. The weirdest thing about menopause, and you said before about you don't think you're experiencing menopause because you haven't got any of the symptoms. So one of my friends has had very little symptom, like physical symptoms, but the form that it quite often takes is we've spent our lives caring for other people, putting our children first, putting our partners first, whatever, and we get to a point where we all go, yeah, no, I've had enough now. And that is quite often the indicator of perimenopause. It's like, you know, I'm really sick of this. I don't want to do this anymore. And it's being aware that there is nothing wrong, because when you first start thinking that, you're going, oh my God, what is wrong? I'm really selfish. I'm such a selfish old bag and whatever. But there's nothing wrong. That is the nature of where we're at physically and emotionally. And it's time to honour that and go, okay, so there has to be another way of me contributing to society, to my family, to myself, other than running around and looking after people. This is where I get to share my wisdom. This is where I get to share my true self with people, and how am I best taking care of myself in order to do that, because it's not running around after the kids anymore, because mostly they're grown up by the time we reach this age, so you don't need to. That I think is the biggest mistake, not honouring that desire to go, right, I want to stop running around after people now.
Well, maybe I could be wrong. That could have been partly what happened to me, because I know there was a very big switch in my life where, and I know that a lot of parents, especially mothers, struggle with this, and I have so many talks with my clients about it, is that they feel guilty because there's things that they need to do for themselves to create a healthier them, and they feel guilty for taking the time out to do that. And we have a conversation about how it's just like, I use the analogy of the when you're in an airplane and they're going through what you do with the oxygen mask, and if you happen to have a crash or something, what do they tell you? They tell you that you must fit your own oxygen mask first before you fit anybody else's, your children's. And why is that? It's because if you can't breathe, how can you help anybody else? And it's the same thing with our health and wellness. If we don't do what we need to do for ourselves, how can we help all those other people that we love? So it's actually not selfish. It's actually a very important part of it. And so many, especially mothers, don't understand. It takes them time to come to that understanding. And thank goodness I did. So maybe I am going through perimenopause.
Yeah.
So you've said that the biggest mistake that most women make is that they don't talk about it. Definitely fair point. So what would you suggest would be maybe the 1, 2, or 3 steps that they need to take for their best health and wellness? And what would be one action step that they can take immediately after, listening to this episode?
I think there's a few different places that I want to. I mean, the first one is the biggest thing is to connect with people. It really is. Is it? I'm not sure. We as women, we are busy mothers or busy with our careers, whatever we're busy with, and we've ended up in isolation, but we're actually naturally community creatures, and we do need to. We're happiest when we're in a community. I mean, I'm an introvert, believe it or not. I'm actually an extroverted introvert.
Me too.
But you too. But I need my alone time. But at the same time, I'm not feeling fully grounded unless I'm within a community and feeling supported. I think the other step is to really, do you know what made the biggest difference for me? I'm only just thinking of this now. When I first decided to, okay, I can't hack myself anymore. I'm fed up of being depressed. I'm fed up of my life looking the way it is. I'm fed up of looking after all the kids. I'm just fed up, like I've had it up to here. I sat down and I started journaling, and I've never written a diary. I find it really difficult. I open a book and there is nothing that I want to write in that book, not a single thing. And a friend said to me, don't write anything, just whatever pops up in your head, stick it down on the page, just put it down on the page. And I spent, without a word of a lie, 3 weeks. And that was all I did. I just, every week, apart from when I was cooking dinner or running the kids around, I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I wrote something like 100,000 words. And I went from handwriting, because my hand was killing me, to typing. So I went onto the computer, and it was just garbage. It didn't make any sense. It was, I was flitting from incidents when I was a kid to something that had happened yesterday to what I was worrying about for the future. And it didn't matter, because it's not going anywhere. All it was getting all of this stuff out of my head and onto the paper, or just out of my head, onto the computer, wherever it was. But how it occurred for me was that it was like my mind was this storage unit that was crammed full like a hoarder's hovel. It was just stuffed full. And all there was one little path through all this junk. And that was the only place I could go. So bit by bit, I was picking up things and putting them somewhere else, just putting them outside so that eventually I could start walking in a different pattern. That was how it occurred to me. So honest to God, first thing that would be my advice to anybody. Just get the junk out of your head and onto paper, because it's the only way you're actually going to see more clearly. And that's a health and well-being thing, because even if you're in an eating pattern, it's the same thing. You're in that junkyard in your head. Just get rid of the junk, get it somewhere else, and then you can put it into some kind of order if you want to.
I absolutely love that you came up with that, because that's one of the biggest tools I use with clients is journaling. And in fact, I realised the power of journaling through my own experience. I was doing a business exercise actually, and I was doing some work on my ideal person that I want to help. And for me, that's in some ways that's easier, because I just need to put myself back into the mind of 180 kilo Shari, and that's the person I want to help. So I did that, and I had the question I was answering was, what are your 3 core life beliefs? And there were 3 lines, and I just automatically, without thinking, I just wrote down 3 things. And the first was that everything happens for a reason. I still believe that to this day. The second one was, everybody else is more important than me. And the third one was, I'm a bad person. Now, what I realised, I never realised those beliefs were in there until I did that unconscious journaling. And what I realised was, because this was actually at, I'd released my 100 kilos by then. And what I realised was that at some point, and I don't know where, but at some point on my journey, those beliefs changed. And if they hadn't changed, I would have gone back to 180 kilo Shari. So journaling is such a powerful tool, and I definitely back you up 100% to do the journaling, people, because you just don't know what's going to come out. So I absolutely love everything that we have spoken about in this episode. Thank you so much. It is something that, as you said, people do not speak about. So we are helping to get this conversation happening a lot more. Thank you. What would be the one thing that when somebody walks away from listening to this episode or watching this episode, what would be the one big thing that you want them to know?
That no matter where they are, they're okay. That sounds really trite, but it's something I didn't know. I didn't know that what I was experiencing was okay. And yet when I look back on it now, it was okay. And there was nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. That's just what's happening. And that to me is the most precious gift. There's nothing wrong. If 180 kilo Shari, there's nothing wrong, but there's stuff you can do if that's not what you want. But also, whatever you're experiencing, be okay with it.
You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed.
You're not broken. That's it. I can't quite put my finger on it, but that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Karen. We will have more episodes, I'm sure, on different things to do with menopause and all of the stuff that goes with that, marriage and motherhood and all of that. But thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And I will put all of the links to connect with the amazing Karen in the show notes, and let us know if you have any comments, if there's any questions you want asked, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Remember to check out the show notes, and if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions, I'd love to hear them. If you've received value from this podcast, make sure to subscribe, and I'd love you to rate and review the show. Have a fabulous day.